Good afternoon. Hello, how are you? Welcome to this week's Strategies for Being Brilliant. Today I'm going to be talking about the Imposter Syndrome, and it's on the Tuesday today. It's on the Tuesday today instead of yesterday, which was obviously the bank holiday Monday. So I'm just going to wait a few minutes to see who joins us. Today's topic is chapter 4 in the book, which is learning to be an imposter tamer. So somebody mentioned a few weeks ago that they'd like some ideas about how to manage the imposter syndrome. So that's what I'm talking about today. So I'm just going to wait for a few minutes to see who's going to be joining us on today's call. I hope you've had a lovely weekend. Wasn't the weather lovely in the early part of the weekend? It was a bit cold yesterday, wasn't it? But and I hope if you are one of the people who are still working and keeping this country going through these strange times, that you have managed to have a bit of time off and a bit of downtime over the last few days. And if you haven't managed it over the weekend, I hope you'll be able to get a bit of downtime over the coming days as well. So I can see a few people are starting to join us now. It's just after past, so I am going to make a start. The imposter syndrome. 20 minutes explaining what it is and sharing with you some practical strategies and tools you can use that will help you to manage it. I'm not going to use the word cure yourself or solve it completely, because I think by its very nature and the times that it rears its ugly head, I think it's probably almost impossible to get rid of completely. But what I have learned myself over the last few years when I've been dealing with it is that if you have a few tried and tested strategies and tools up your sleeve, you can minimise the impact quickly and help yourself manage it more effectively. So for those of you who are joining us today who may not have heard of the imposter, it's the feeling of being a fake and a fraud. It's basically an extreme form of self-doubt. The original research was carried out in the 1970s by two American psychologists called Clance and Imes, and I've got their book somewhere here. Let me show you. So this was the book from the original research, The Imposter Phenomenon, Overcoming the Fear That Haunts Your Success. The original research was done in the field of high-flying female academics who found themselves in senior roles but then kind of froze and their careers didn't go any further. They were too frightened to share their research, to raise their head above the parapet, to make their presence really felt. So the original research was done with women. Subsequent research, more recent contemporary research, has seen that it affects men as well as women, and some statistics that I found a while ago suggested that at any one point up to 70% of us in the workplace will be experiencing these feelings of being a fake, a fraud, that you don't belong in your role, that you've no right to be there. That anybody who has given you that role doesn't know what they're talking about. The feeling that it's a fluke, it's just luck that you've managed to land this role that you're in, and you don't really deserve it. So as you can imagine, having those feelings can be quite debilitating and stop you in your tracks. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt like that, why not just give us a quick nod in the comments? Has this happened to you? I explained on Friday that I first came across this many years ago, decades ago in fact, when I was a teacher, and I realised that every time I had a classroom observation, I just ended up feeling that, you know, this was it, this was the time I was going to get that tap on the shoulder and I was going to be caught out. And it's a distinctly unpleasant feeling. And it wasn't until I read a magazine article that I realised that I wasn't alone. It had a name. And then when I started talking to colleagues about it, I realised that they felt exactly the same as well. So this is what I'm going to share with you this afternoon. A few tips, tools and techniques that you can use that will help you to manage it a little more successfully. So firstly, I think it's important to recognise when these feelings occur. Often these feelings, so what does Rachel says, yes, usually when I'm doing something outside my comfort zone. It's good that you recognise that. Not always good that you have it, obviously, but yes, it's a feeling of newness. It often comes with that. So typically these things will be when you're starting a new job or doing something that is new to you that makes you feel intensely uncomfortable. One of the interesting things about the original research was it was done in the field of academia, which is a hugely competitive arena where academics publish their work, and research has shown that it often rears its ugly head in arenas where we have the likelihood of feeling judged. So if you're obviously starting a new role, but if you're doing a presentation, if you're writing something, if you're giving a performance, or if you're an artist as well, that's the other area that's been spotted in. If you are undergoing some kind of artistic endeavour, that your work is put out there to be judged by whoever, that can prompt these feelings as well. So it's important to recognise that it comes with this feeling of newness, and that up to 70% of us at any one time experience these feelings. In that sense, we can use the word normal about it, and I think it's an important step to normalise these feelings. You're not alone. Everybody gets these feelings at some point or another, and I think just understanding that can help us feel more comfortable with it, and it can also help us feel more comfortable when we talk to somebody about it, because that's a very useful strategy. If you are feeling like this, you know what, talk to somebody. Often just talking things over with somebody and explaining how you're feeling can help you to get a grip on these feelings, and you can receive some reassurance. Gathering a network of people around you. I'm a big fan of building a community of relationships, of people who are doing the same or similar things as you, or who are several steps ahead of you and have already been there, done it, got the t-shirt, so to speak. The vast likelihood is that they will have experienced similar feelings as yourself, and the feelings that you're feeling now. They will, particularly if you're in a new role, speaking to somebody who's already been there and done it, they will be able to reassure you, offer some mentorship to you, but the act of having somebody who actively understands the challenges that you may be facing is really important. So gather a network of people around you who've been where you are, who've done what you're doing, or who are doing it. And that can offer a great deal of support in times when you are feeling wobbly or unsure of yourself. And you know what? Listen to what they say. Julie, hi, lovely to see you on today's session. It goes without saying, know your stuff and be up to date. I think sometimes this can undermine us as well. I have in the past spoken to people who have told me that they're feeling like this. For example, they've got to give a presentation in a meeting, and when I ask them what they're doing to prepare for it, how they prepare to usually admit, actually, I kind of wing it a bit. Well, it's quite likely that you're going to feel like an imposter if you are just showing up and you're trying to wing things. So make sure that you are fully prepared and that you are as up to date as possible in what you're doing, and that can give you a really good set of foundations for managing this. Review your successes and own it. So one of the features of being an imposter is the feeling that any success you've had is down to fluke, luck, and that it's unrepeatable. So if you remember back to, I think it was the first week I talked about talked to haven't I about strengths and weaknesses and your successes, and keeping keeping a record, keeping a journal. I will go over that in some detail in another week, but I think it's really important that you understand and recognise your successes and own them. I once gave a talk many years ago, a networking group, and I asked the women to write down, it was a women's networking group, and I asked them to write down 3 things they'd achieved that week, 3 successes. And I had a sea of blank faces looking back at me because they couldn't see that anything they'd done qualified as a success. So I had to rephrase it a little bit and say to them, write down 3 things you've done this week, and they were all fine at that. And I think the point here that I'm making is that we have myriads of successes every single day. You do not have to be, feeding the poor and hungry of the world, or solving the economic crisis all over the world, or finding the answer to current circumstances. It's great if you are, but most of us, myself included, live our lives on a slightly more normal level. And my success personally is measured in small increments. So when I was a single mum with my son, getting us up, dressed and out of the house without spilling toothpaste down the top, and making sure we were at the childminders on time was a massive achievement for me, because it meant that I could still go to work and do my job. So noting down your individual successes, however small, and owning them, I would say, is a really important part of this, of managing these feelings of being an imposter. Getting used to seeing your success in black and white on a paper. And over time that builds up to a really strong foundation of who you are as a person in whatever field it is that you are operating. And in the same way, setting yourself small goals and achieving them, that changes how we see ourselves. So rather than seeing ourselves as somebody who is completely out of their depth and floundering, setting ourselves small goals and working towards achieving them actually tells our brains and tells ourselves, therefore, that we are somebody actually who can achieve things. And it changes the way that we see ourselves, and this in turn changes the way that other people see us whenever we turn up in certain circumstances. So there's another couple of points here. If you've got any questions, do pop them into the comment box underneath my screen. So there's an exercise that I go through with clients whenever this rears its head with them, and you can do this on your own, but it's also very useful to do with a partner, and that is to ask yourself the question, in what ways am I not an imposter? In what ways am I not an imposter? So you ask yourself that question, and you can do this in 2 ways. You can write the answer down every time you say the answer to the question, or what I think is really powerful, and I do this with clients, is I ask them the question, in what ways am I not an are you not an imposter? And they verbally tell me the answer, and I scribble the answers down. And I found that after the first few times, people actually get on a bit of a roll with this. I'm not an imposter because, I'm not an imposter because, I'm not an imposter because. And I had one client once who was able to reel out 2 pages of A4 reasons why she wasn't an imposter. She was about to start a new role, a new senior role, and she was, in the grip of the imposter. She was really, struggling. But that activity that we did it for 20 minutes, 2 pages of A4 notes I made for her, and she was fantastic. After that, she felt much calmer. She'd kind of rationalised to herself and was able to access that calmer part and more logical part of her brain that allowed her to recognise her successes. So I recognise that as an activity that you can do that will help you to manage those feelings. So the task for this week, let's see if we've got any, do I have any other questions? Can't see any questions at the moment, but if you have any, do pop them into the box underneath where I'm speaking, and I will answer them for you. Career mapping is a very useful tool to use. Get your CV out. And if you haven't got a CV, then take this as an opportunity to spend an hour sitting down and reviewing your career so far, or your life so far. So most of the lens that I look through when I'm talking about this tends to be career-wise, because that's the way that I work with people, but it might not be. It could be that you are somebody who volunteers, for example, for a lot of things, and part of your volunteering involves, you know, going to meetings, going to networking groups, for example. So these feelings can strike in any arena of your life, whatever it is that you're doing. The imposter doesn't discriminate against any of us. So sitting yourself down and tracking your career, doing a career or a life map that can help you to see where you've been, all your experiences. That can be a really illuminating thing to do. Get your CV out and have a good old read through it, and then imagine that you're applying for a job and that you're going to write a covering letter that explains all your experience, your achievements and your successes succinctly and powerfully in that letter, as though you were going to use it to apply for the job. That is an incredibly powerful exercise to do, and I can guarantee that at the end of it you will be feeling quite different about yourself. Then get that letter and keep it somewhere safe and refer back to it often. Okay, and at the end of these sessions, we are coming up to the end of the 20 minutes. At the end of these sessions, I like to leave you with something that you can, a task you can either go off and do, or you can think about and mull over. And that is it for this week. Review your career, review what you've been doing throughout your adult life in terms of your successes, your achievements, challenges that you've had and how you've overcome those challenges as well. And use those to write yourself a letter as though you were going to apply for a job, and pop them all in and then read it through and just see how it makes you feel. Now, this is for your eyes only, so don't hold back. There's no time to wrap yourself in a modesty blanket. It is a time for getting everything down on paper and then taking a step back and reviewing it. Okay, so I've shared with you there some ideas for in 20 minutes for helping you to manage the imposter. Recognise when it happens. Typically this is at times of newness. If it happens in at other times for you as well, note those down and think about what's going on there. What's, you know, what do you think is causing this to happen? And it could be that maybe there's a person that prompts these feelings for you, and that might be worth exploring a little more. Know your stuff, be up to date, be prepared. So important and often overlooked. Don't wing it. Gather a network of people or a community of people around you who are doing what you do or who have already done it, that can provide some support and encouragement, and also listen to you when you experience these feelings. So as I explained earlier, in today's session, I came across this when I was a teacher, and once I started speaking to other teachers about it and how they felt when we had online training, that wasn't even a thing when I was a teacher all those years ago, when we had lesson observations, it became very obvious it wasn't just me, and there's a lot of comfort to be had in that. Set yourself some realistic goals and work towards achieving them. These change how we view ourselves, and in turn that changes how other people view us. Review your successes frequently, write them down. Use the talking phrase, I am not an imposter because, and either record the results down on a bit of paper, or better still, do it with somebody that you trust and make it a verbal exercise. That works absolutely wonders. And then the last tip here is about getting your CV out, or reviewing your professional career or your life, and noting down everything you've achieved, and then using that information to write yourself a letter as though you were applying for a job, and just review how differently you feel afterwards. Now, there's a lot of things there, and if you are subject to these feelings of being an imposter, then, you know, try one or two of them and see how they feel for you and how they work. The trick is with this is to find strategies, tools and techniques that work for you in those situations. But I can't stress enough really the importance of sharing how you're feeling with somebody and getting that bit of feedback. So, are there any questions or any comments you'd like to make? We have been talking now for about 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop, and if there are no more comments or questions, I'm going to bring this to an end. Friday lunchtime I'll be back here at 12:30 to have our catch up and chat to see how you've got on with some of the ideas from this. Next week's session I think will be on Tuesday as well. I've got a diary clash on Monday, but I'll pop a note of that on my Facebook page and remind everybody about it on Friday when we speak. So if there are no further comments, no further questions, then I'm going to bring this to a close, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and stay safe, take good care, and I will speak to you on Friday. Bye bye.